sure that they have access to this later. So let's kick it off and get started. A few housekeeping items. One is, if you are not speaking, we would appreciate if you can keep yourself on mute so we can hear the people that are speaking. We also have the chat. Chat is enabled for you to message the host. There's a number of people that are hosts on this event. We are taking questions for Councilmember Richards through the chat. So if you would like us to take your questions as time would allow, please put your question in the chat. Thank you so much. Let's get started. Thank you so much, everyone. Welcome. My name is Yatin Chu, and I am co-president of Place NYC. We are so happy to have many communities in our great borough of Queens here tonight. Co-sponsoring this event with Place NYC are Queens Parents United, the Caribbean American Society of New York City, South Asians Fund for Education, Scholarship, and Training, Manny Perez, the State Democratic Committee leader in Northwest Queens, New York City Residents Alliance, and the Chinese American Citizens Alliance of Greater New York. We are delighted to have Councilmember Donovan Richards here tonight as our guest of honor. He is the Democratic nominee for Queens Borough President. Also here with us tonight are representatives from Senator Comrie's office, from Senator Sanders' office. We may have a representative from Assembly Member Hyman's office. We also have the Education Director of the Queens Borough President's office, Monica Gutierrez, as well as parent leaders on the PEP.
You just went on mute.
Okay, thank you. Don't know how that happened. Over 300,000 public school students are enrolled in nearly 400 schools across Queens. We are a borough of longtime New Yorkers and of immigrants. Nearly half of our residents in Queens are foreign-born. So it's no surprise that Queens has the highest percentage of English language learners in our schools. 1 in 7 students are ELs. We have our fair share of students in poverty. 70% of Queens students qualify for free and reduced lunch. But even in the most overcrowded schools in New York City, we have managed to educate the most number of students grade proficient in math and ELA. Queens has the highest number of students who scored the highest marks on our state math test. Our students earn seats at top citywide high schools. Nearly 60% of Bronx Science, 40% of Stuyvesant, and 25% of Brooklyn Tech are students from Queens. This is also out of necessity, as Queens is short 15,000 high school seats. We are all here tonight because we place a high priority on education, and we understand the role that elected officials play in the policies and funding of our public schools. Let's hear from our communities on what we want from our public schools and from Councilmember Richards on his education vision and plans for Queens families. Now I turn the mic over to Jean Han of Queens Parents United, who will introduce Councilmember Richards.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jean Han. I'm a parent with a child attending public school in Rego Park, a PTA member and a co-founding member of Queens Parents United. Councilmember Donovan Richards Jr. is a lifelong resident of Southeast Queens and the Rockaways and was elected to New York City Council District 31 in March 2013. Among his accomplishments as council member, Richards was appointed as the chair of the Committee on Environmental Protection and successfully secured more than $1.5 billion to address sewer infrastructure in Southeast Queens. As chair of the subcommittee on zoning and franchises, Richards helped to negotiate a stronger, more inclusive, affordable housing plan in East Midtown and East New York and secured $288 million in investments for local rezoning in Far Rockaway. More recently, as chair of the Committee on Public Safety, he has held oversight hearings on the NYPD's school safety internal discipline and secured $70 million for his community's 40-year dream of a new police station, the 116th precinct in Rosedale. On a personal level, as a father of a kindergartner, Councilmember Richards knows firsthand the pains and anxiety that we are all undergoing as families as we return to school, remote or blended, during these unprecedented times. The challenges our children are facing now will not only leave an indelible mark on their future and forever be a part of their persona, but also upon us as parents and guardians who are struggling, frustrated, and concerned whether they are receiving an adequate education and the best support in their local school communities as possible and not falling between the cracks. More than ever, this highlights why education is such a crucial issue for this race. So I would now like to extend a warm welcome and turn this over to Councilmember Richards to hear how, as a Democratic candidate for the office of Queens Borough President, he envisions in shaping the future for all children in Queens. We welcome Councilmember Donovan Richards.
Thank you so much, and I want to thank you for that introduction. It all sounds so good and so real. And I'm New York City Councilmember Donovan Richards. Proud to be here tonight. Proud to be the Democratic nominee for Queens Borough President. Just some other history as a council member. You know, one of the things that we extensively focused on was making sure that capital funds were going into my schools. You know, I'm proud of this because we've pumped close to $50 million into our local schools over the course of the last about 7 years. You know, many of the institutions I represent had great programming, but you know, when we talk about the lack of investment in underserved communities like Far Rockaway, parts of Southeast Queens, it was critical to ensure that our schools certainly were getting their fair share of funding, which actually provides the roadmap for a lot of our kids to be successful. So if you don't have those pieces built out, when there is a challenge around fairness in the budget, you automatically are going to have some real challenges in these institutions. I'll give you just a quick story of Far Rockaway High School, for instance, where they had a great program where they were training our young people specifically, but their parents also had access to training in Cisco, which if you have a cable box, you'll know that your cable box is programmed by Cisco. They had computers from 1992 in 2014, and we went in and redid their entire lab because we thought and believed in helping them to succeed to get to the next level. So, you know, a large part of where I envisioned the Borough President's office going, one of the reasons I was supported by the UFT because they knew our record on that. But, you know, we have a substantial capital budget and we want to ensure that we're utilizing that. And I know Melinda did a lot of that. But, you know, we want to focus on making sure that we're building on our STEM labs, that we're building capital projects that will really enable our young people to succeed in the future. Let's talk about school seats too. I mean, we all know that Queens continues to be shortchanged when it comes to school seats. So that's why overcrowding continues to be a huge challenge for us. Many of you know or may recognize that, you know, Manhattan is a thing, not of the past, still plays an important role in our city, but the outer boroughs are growing tremendously. You know, when you look at our waterfront communities from Long Island City, when you look at downtown Jamaica, when you look at Far Rockaway, you'll see that these communities are growing tremendously. So our job is going to have to be, even during these challenging times, and let me just reiterate that, we are in a $9 billion deficit in the city of New York. We're going to have to fight for every penny, and it's literally brawling for every penny to make sure that we can expand our school seats, that we can ensure that even as development happens in communities, that we're working with the city. And I'm proud to have been a sponsor on some bills in the city council, actually, that now mandates the city to look at the ratio of school seats as new developments come up in the city council, because that is something that just was not happening, and we have to plan for the future. But with that comes the expansions of our schools and more school seats, certainly. Social and emotional learning, huge issue. You know, I mean, listen, I have a kindergartner, proud father. I'm doing the remote learning, and obviously there are a lot of challenges around health and safety right now. A large population of parents are keeping their kids home. I personally am going to take the chance and roll the dice on the blended learning. But the fears are real for each and every one of us right now, right? You know, as parents, we're trying to make these decisions. And if you're a parent trying to get back to work, it is just a challenging time on how do you choose between the blended or doing the 100% remote learning. And a large part of my job will be actually coming in is working with DOE, working with the Department of Health, and working with the administration to ensure that, you know, we can have a peace of mind when we send our kids to school. The only way that's going to happen is to ensure that the resources, that there's transparency and accountability there as we move forward. So that is something we certainly are going to continue to work very closely with as we try to get back into getting all of our children back to school, which is just challenging during this period of COVID-19. You know, we could talk about gifted and talented learning schools and programming, and how we have not seen that historically expanded into a lot of communities of color. I think Southeast Queens has about 1 or 2 schools. The Rockaways doesn't even have, at least Far Rockaway doesn't even have a gifted and talented program. We want to see a lot more expansions around these programs as well. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of what my vision is, because I think that, you know, listening is certainly more important during this period, even before we take the seat in January. And I don't want to be cocky or arrogant and being on this line and saying that, you know, we've won this race already, because we still have a race to get through in November. So I'm hoping many of you on this line will certainly vote for me in November. But largely what we're going to pride ourselves on is really getting around the borough and hearing the concerns, and using our checkbook, most importantly, to make sure we're filling the gaps where we can. And also working closely with, you know, our CECs who play a tremendous role, our PTAs, our PAs. You know, we're going to have to work collectively together to make sure that we strengthen the system here. No secret that Queens is the most diverse borough in this country. And a large part of the work I'll have to do as well is to make sure that those ESL services are being provided, that programming is being expanded, that we're working with local community-based organizations. I am a huge supporter of community learning schools. I think they changed the name now, but I've seen what they can do in communities like Far Rockaway, where you have the wraparound services that you're providing to many students. And I'll just go back just a little bit more on a personal note. You know, growing up, I went to public school all the way up until I went to Jamaica High School in the 11th grade. And it was really challenging because we didn't have enough guidance counselors. Although I did have a really good guidance counselor, but I was one of those students who almost fell through the cracks because of peer pressure, because of the challenges you know, outside of the school as well. And Jamaica High School really challenged me extensively. And my parents, you know, saw me going down a certain road and worked hard to make sure that I could be here today. So there are a lot of students like me that if we don't receive those services, if we don't have the peer support groups, if we don't have the social and emotional learning, if we don't have after school programming, if our schools are not receiving the resources, this is one of the greatest things the City Council did, is the Fair Student Funding Formula. We still need to see equity when it comes to the Campaign for Fiscal Equity. The state owes New York City over $1 billion. We need to make sure that that money is coming down to our institutions, but more importantly, into the pockets of the borough who have been left behind historically because the investment has not reached these schools. So there's a lot of work to be done. I don't have to tell you about the challenges around COVID-19 and what that's done and how that's exacerbated poverty, how that's impacted our educational system, how our kids will have more challenges moving forward, especially if you need special education services, if you have a disability. You know, we have a myriad of challenges. One of the things I want to just reiterate before we start to go into questions is that the only way we get through this is together. And there should be no divide here. We all may have different views on different issues, But at the end of the day, we have to keep our minds on why are we doing what we're doing? We're doing it for the future of our children, to make sure that they can succeed, that they can sit in these positions or chairs that we're in, and that they can actually do better than us. I think, that was the aim and goal of my parents, to make sure that I could do better than they did. So we have to make sure we're fighting for that. But the only way to do that is to do it together, and to identify and certainly recognize that there are a lot of inequities in this system, that there are a lot of children being left behind daily. I don't have to talk about violence and why, what leads young people to violence, feeling left behind, being suspended, for simple things that they shouldn't be suspended for. So we have to end this school to prison pipeline that we find ourselves in this education system, if our kids are going to have a fighting chance moving forward. So I look forward to working with each and every one of you. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you to each and every one of you who are sponsoring this event. I know you care deeply about the future of education, and I look forward to answering any questions to the best of my ability. And I'm one of those rare politicians. If I don't know the answer, I'm not going to sit here and make it up. But one of the things I will pride myself in is listening and studying to make sure that we can do the best for the children of our borough. So I want to thank you for having me this evening, and I look forward to hearing from everyone. Thank you.
So I just want to let everyone who are here, we have, I think, over 100 now in our room, to just let you know the flow of the evening. Thank you so much, Donovan Richards. We appreciate your remarks. What I like to do is give 1 to 2 minutes for each of our co-sponsors to speak a little bit about their advocacy and the priorities that they see for their communities. After that, we will open up for questions and answers. My colleague here, Horace Davis, will lead the first part of Q&A, and Phil Wong will lead the second half of the Q&A, and then we'll wrap it up with some closing comments from Councilmember Richards, and that will be our evening. So let's get started. First up is Ms. Zeta Udine. Ms. Zeta, I hope you're in the room. Please unmute yourself, and love to hear from you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for planning tonight. I'm very glad you guys are organizing. Thank you, our Donovan. Thank you, other elected members who are in partner. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm very glad to be here tonight because safest organization is the well known in the community, well known in the New York City. I think Donovan and other elected members knows very well what kind of job safest organizing is providing. Due to the lack of language access, our parents and children are suffering. Even more so after COVID. Some did not have any contact from their children's school. Mass emailing in a language that they did not speak simply would not work. Some did not receive any communication from their children's teacher until too late failure. Some did not know how to request laptop for their children's remote learning. Now their children are deviceless at home. Even they miss their orientation. We need more funding to train these parents to help them navigate the complex Department of Education system. Our parents value children's education. They made sacrifice to ensure their children receive top education so that they can have better jobs and future. This is the only way to elevate the whole family. 36% of the station students are from non-English speaking homes. Roughly 20% are Bengali working families. These students work hard to get a seat in the top high school. Please take this into consideration before supporting any changes in the admission criteria. Thank you. We need a real support. We are over 89% LAP parents and students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Zeta. Next is Jean Han of QPU.
Hi again. As one of the co-founding members of Queens Parents United, I am excited to be here tonight. Queens Parents United is a coalition of parents, families, and other community stakeholders who are committed to pursuing excellence in our public school system by improving schools in local communities. We advocate for parents to take back control of what we see as a continually diminishing return on our investment in public school education. Department of Education budgets and consultant spending keeps going up, but schools are overcrowded, academic and enrichment programs are getting cut or not even offered, and there's little measurable improvement in academic outcomes or quality of education. We advocate for accountability from the Department of Education, where all too often families are treated as a monolithic group and ideological policies are created by those with no skin in the game and imposed from top down with disregard of how it might impact low-income, working class, middle class, and immigrant families. We are opposed to government-imposed quotas in the form of mandated diversity plans as a substitute for quality in public schools, forced busing, transit plans masked as controlled choice, and dezoning in elementary and middle schools for the sake of accommodating quotas. Instead, we advocate for equity in school resources and building new schools in overcrowded areas. We advocate for improving our school communities through sincere public engagement, one that is community-led and not community-fed. It takes a village to raise a child, and that begins at home and at our local school community. We should be appreciating and investing in them and working together to make that happen. Because by helping our local communities be strong, it will only make our children stronger. Thank you to Councilmember Richards and everyone for attending.
Thank you so much, Jean. We have Horace Davis from Caribbean American Society of New York City. Horace, you need to unmute yourself.
All right, good evening, everyone. Horace Davis, Caribbean American Society of New York, also known as CASONI. I am currently the president of this organization, and I know we're running short on time, so I'll be somewhat brief. The overarching mission of CASONI is to really build and cultivate a stronger sense of pride within the Caribbean American community. We support that with 4 main objectives. The first objective is business, supporting those who support businesses in our community, whether through training, job creation. The second, and why I'm so incredibly honored to be a part of this conversation, is to encourage our children, especially those K through 8, interested in pursuing careers in the areas of STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We know that we want our kids to have a quality education, but we also know that we want that education to be aligned with the careers of the future. And these are not just the careers of the future, but they are well-paying careers. The fourth objective of the organization is networking. So providing opportunities for our members to network and share resources. And last, and I think very important, is to engage in the conversation in the development of policies, legislation, laws that govern resources for our communities. And with that, I'll pass it on to our next guest and look forward to the questioning.
Thank you, Horace. Donghui from Residents Alliance. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, Yating. Thank you and please for putting this event together. And thank you, Councilmember Richards, to be here today. Congratulations to your win of primary. So my name is Donghui. I'm the father of 2 public high school students. I'm also the president of New York City Residents Alliance. So who we are just grassroots parents from 5 boroughs. And we are together to promote and pursue justice and equality. So our mission is to create safe and healthy schools and communities for all the New York City parents and children. We are the ones who were screaming for 2 years to keep the SAT test. We are the ones who were opposing the District 28 forced diversity plan because that would just potentially busing the middle schoolers for 2.5 hours every day for nothing. And those 2.5 hours something that most families cannot afford. Today, I'm sure that you will hear all kinds of issues, but I think the center of all our concerns is that we do not want politics in education. We want our city government to make some real efforts to solve the real issues. There are schools in our city that are underperforming. Then please just fix those schools and make them perform. Please do not try to shuffle and mix the students from one school to another. And that we all know that the average reading and math scores for our Black and Hispanic kids, they are not satisfactory enough. Then please work with the parents and educators to improve their learning. And we also probably know that more Asian families succeed on the education. That's not because they have any privilege. 60% Asian students in Stevenson High School are from low-income families. They succeed because the families care more about their kids' study. They save, they sacrifice for their children to learn. So those kind of commitment to education is something that should be rewarded, should be encouraged, and should be learned from, but rather than to be punished, to be penalized. So please do not try to eliminate any test. I truly believe test. The test is competition, and the competition motivates our kids to learn. So whether it's SHAT or the regions or the semester by semester GPA, the low test scores are just evidence that the city's education failure. There's nothing wrong with the test. There's nothing wrong with our kids. So we truly believe every child can learn as long as we teach them. And it's the responsibility of our adults and our government to provide such resources. So please forget color, forget race, whether the kids are white or Black, Asian or Hispanic, it simply doesn't matter. They are all American kids and they all have American dream. So please add more GNT program, add more seats, and create more school, create more special high school in Queens, which is a very fast growing Queens community, and let every child to learn and excel. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, Derek. Up next is Manny Perez. Manny, unmute yourself, please.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Councilman. It's wonderful to see you again. And yes, everyone, I am a politician. I am a political leader in Northwest Queens, district leader, a member of the Queens County organization, and we are concerned about education. If we don't educate our kids, how can we expect to have educated citizens? In Queens, thanks to our diversity, I really think we can bring back an old concept, which was the educational community, made up of our families, our schools, all the professionals, and our local community, the businesses, the leaders in the community. We come together. We're not doing that right now. And with the challenges of the pandemic, I do think, and I ask the councilman to consider working with that, because we have an example here of nonprofit organizations who are worried about the children. Let's help them help our Queens children. So thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manny. Our last speaker for this section is Deborah Alexander from Place NYC.
Hey everyone, I will be brief. My name is Deborah Alexander. I am a public school parent of two, a Queens CEC co-president, and a PTA SLT member for many years. But today I am proud to speak as the co-secretary of Place NYC. Place became a touchstone for me during the height of the pandemic, when there was so much to worry about that it felt tone deaf to raise concerns about education. But Place understands that a high quality education for all children is an issue about which to be worried. It is an issue of health and safety that has far-reaching effects and long-lasting consequences. Accelerated education and its advocates are often misunderstood. Its advocates are often reductively labeled as privileged and self-concerned. It is true that Place NYC advocates for things like the ill-named Gifted and Talented program and preservation of the SHSAT. However, we believe that accelerated learners exist and remain unidentified in every neighborhood, every school, every classroom. Every child should have access to their legally guaranteed appropriate education. This guarantee applies to children across the learning spectrum, and a child who requires acceleration is no less deserving of their appropriate education than one who requires extra help. Place reaches out to underserved communities to create partnerships that facilitate awareness of these opportunities. We advocate for an expansion of honors classes and gifted and talented programs in districts that have had them systematically stripped. There is no reason a child should have to travel an hour or more to attend a school that meets their needs. Place wants to see meaningful change that starts at the beginning of the education process, not cosmetic change that solely advantages politicians and treats children like one-size-fits-all widgets instead of individuals with unique needs. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to collaborating on an inclusive vision for high-quality, rigorous education for every New York City child.
Thank you, Deborah. I actually misspoke. You're not the last person to speak. We have Phil Wong of Cacagney. So Phil, please.
Yatin, for putting all this together. Councilman Richards, congratulations for winning the primary. Thank you for all the parents for taking the time to sign in. My name is Phil Wong, the president of the Chinese American Citizens Alliance of Greater New York. The national chapter has been around since 1895, and the New York City chapter was reactivated several years ago, back in 2016. And quickly, our mission is to empower Chinese Americans as citizens of the United States of America by advocacy for Chinese American interests based on the principles of fairness and equal opportunity, and guided by the ideas of patriotism, civility, dedication to family and culture, and the highest ethical and moral standards. Ever since we founded, we've been aggressively defending a merit-based educational system. We're working with many parents in this forum right now to defend keeping a merit-based system by saving the SHSAT, by saving the Gifted and Talented program, and also attending many hearings in the state assembly and the city council levels. I myself is also the president of Education Council 24, and the whole council has been busy this week dealing with school opening issues and the parents, and you will hear from me later on those issues. We had a whole spectrum of problems to deal with this whole week, from internet outages to people, schools with no one manning the phones, and some of the office workers, they are rumored to be furloughed. So furloughing is a major issue, which I'll bring up later in the Q&A session. But thank you, thanks for having me here, and we'll welcome all of you to this forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil. I want to turn the mic over to Horace Davis, who is going to moderate the first half of our Q&A session. Horace?
Okay, outstanding. We'll get started. I must say, though, I did forget to mention one very important thing. I am the father of 2 daughters that's in the public school system and a son that just recently graduated from the public school system. Councilmember Richards, I will start with the questions here. And you've heard many comments, and I believe in responding to these questions, you will be able to provide your perspective on what you bring to the solution of these issues. The first question is associated with the issue of the specialized high schools. Black and Latino representation at Brooklyn Technical High School was at 50% of the student body during the 80s and 90s. This admissions process has not changed, including the test. Yet, we have seen a significant and unacceptable decline in Black and Latino students in our specialized high schools. What do you see as the root cause of this problem? And what will you do to reverse this unacceptable reality? Would you please elaborate on how you want to reform the specialized high school admission process? Councilmember Richards.
Well, thank you. And let me say that, you know, just starting off, I know that's a big question, and that will be a question for the next mayor as well. And I'm not punting on it. And I just want to point out that I do not solely, and I know it may not be popular on this line, I do not solely believe that one test should be a determinant on you getting into a specialized high school. I think it puts undue pressure on a lot of students, and I think we should be looking at students holistically. I pointed to myself as a great example of that in Jamaica High School, and I'm about to be your Queens Borough President, last I checked, by God's grace. But one of the things that we have to do is make sure that we're meeting the social and emotional needs of students. This does have a question to do with access. You know, I think I heard the gentleman say, you know, parents need to be engaged. Well, in Southeast Queens, you know, which is a Black middle-class enclave, you have a lot of parents who are engaged in their children's lives, who are working parents, who do want to see the best for their children. But the problem has always been, as we've seen, systematic racism that does lock a lot of young people out of these communities. It locks them out of the opportunities in these schools. Now, I also am a firm believer that you should not have to necessarily travel 2 hours to get to a specialized high school as well. We should have those specific programs located in many pockets around the borough. So, you know, one of the things I want to work with the next administration on is really pushing for the expansion of more specialized high schools in pockets across Queens, like Southeast Queens, like other parts of Western Queens, where you do have specific talent, but just the question of access and process and information and preparedness. You know, what organizations are out there that are really doing the after school tutoring? You know, these are things we hear often from underserved communities around the borough. So it's not a question of, is there talent here? Because if you came here and met many parents or students around here, they are more than capable of getting into a specialized high school. The question is, what is the outreach? What are we doing to prepare them for a test if there's going to be a test in the first place? But my personal and professional opinion on this is that there's more to success than just a test. And we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we're looking at this much differently. COVID-19 should be a wake-up call for each and every one of us, because all of us are impacted by COVID-19, some communities more than others. So that's my opinion on it. I do not believe there should be one test. I think we have to look at the whole student. And there are many students like me, like I said, who are out there who weren't the best test takers, but who were great on critical thinking, who can succeed, but who just were not solely great at just test taking.
Well, appreciate the response there. The one thing I do want to follow up on that question was the last piece of that was, would you elaborate on how you would reform the admissions process? We understand, and I think you answered the first part of that question.
Right.
But I
Well,
don't think there was a lot of clarity on your position in reforming that process.
Right.
What would that look like?
Well, I know there's some legislation in the city council, for instance, which would enable a process to provide testing for every student, right? So right now, the question of how do you even know you can apply for a specialized high school? That information is not there right now. So how do we ensure just the question of access and information is getting out there? How do we ensure that tutoring services are being offered to every student possible across the spectrum in Queens is there? This is a question of access. We could get into the technicalities of it, but at the end of the day, there are many corners of this borough that have historically who don't know, who parents may not, like my parents, may not have made it through high school, right? Who may not have had that access, but who want the best for their children, and don't know where to turn. I think early on, one of the panelists spoke of how they didn't even get information on remote learning or how to get access to a tablet. It's no different here. This is all a question of access. And we need to make sure that there's access there for every community and that every community is getting its due resources so that we can get our students. And if there's going to be a test, even if there's going to be a test, there needs to be access, there needs to be preparedness, there need to be resources pumped into community-based organizations. But don't tell me that there are not children in these communities who can succeed if they're given a chance.
This information and understanding that these opportunities exist is absolutely, I believe, important. Thank you for that response. My next question is in the area of language access. How can Queens help its young students with non-English speaking immigrant parents from school communications, their children's academic progress, support services for ELLS, and students with disabilities? These families seem to be left in the dark.
Well, I'm the proud son of an immigrant who literally just became a citizen last year. So I'm well aware of these challenges. And this goes back to accountability and transparency. The Department of Education really needs to have a real outreach strategy. You know, each school, and, you know, as we talk about and we look at services, and this gets back to that important question of making sure that our schools have the resources that they need. There should be people assigned to do this work as well, but with cultural competency, as well as we talk about language access, materials going out to communities, right? Queens has, you know, people in Queens speak over 190 languages. There are over 200 countries represented right here in this borough. You know, how is DOE working intricately with each school on the ground? What resources, and I want to take the onus just off of them. The question becomes, what are the resources for the CBOs? That's why I like the model, the community learning model, because I saw it work in Far Rockaway, where we had a school that went from a 50% graduate rate to almost a 90% graduate rate, because we were able to have those wraparound services. That is QIRT, Queens Information for Research and Technology, where we have a lot of a large Hispanic population in the Rockaways that's growing as well. A lot of children whose parents may not even speak English as well. But one of the things that worked in that specific school was making sure that those wraparound services were there, ensuring that language access was a key part of it, even their PTA meetings, making sure that there was dual language there. There are programs out there like that that should be expanded into different schools. I know we have, for instance, in my district, and I'm going to talk a lot about my district because there's been some work done on it. We have, I believe it's PS 43, like I said, where we have a large Hispanic population growing. One of the things we did when we looked at the resurgence of downtown Far Rockaway in the post-COVID world was we looked at dual language access and programming in that specific school. So these are things we need to get creative on. But more importantly, there has to be accountability. And a lot of the planning feels very top down, and somebody talked about that now. How are the parents really being engaged in these conversations? And two, how seriously is DOE taking the concerns of parents around the borough when they bring these things up? So I don't want to put the sole onus just on the DOE. One of the things I want to do as the borough president is to create a immigrant learning center, and it's something that I rolled out with Assembly Member Catalina Cruz, something that should operate out of Borough Hall. We should have agencies at the table. We should have community-based organizations that people know they can come to Borough Hall to get. So if there are questions around these things, they can get answers. But the second thing I'll say on that is that I don't want to be stuck in Borough Hall. You know, we want to bring a lot of these services into corners of Corona and East Elmhurst, you know, a lot of different pockets of this borough where we do have a lot of ESL students. So this is a question, once again, of accountability. making sure that we're getting around and listening into these corners of the borough, and more importantly, making sure that the services are there and that there is cultural competency attached to this as well.
Okay, outstanding. Thank you for that response. Then I'll move on to the next question, which will be in the area of gifted and talented, academic screens, and advanced coursework. What is your position on accelerated education, and how do you plan to address the scarcity of these programs? This includes G&T. If you're not speaking, if you don't mind putting your computer on mute. So the question is, this includes G&T programs for elementary grades, middle school SP and honors programs, and academic screen schools or college level AP courses in high schools.
So listen, I think this goes right back to that question again. And I don't have, and, I represent the Rockaways, where, we have a lot of talented young people there. There's not one G&T program there. My colleague, I don't know if she's on or her staff is on, Assemblymember Alicia Heineman. I work with Councilmember Idanique Miller, a lot of our Southeast Queens colleagues, because we didn't even have enough gifted in G&Ts here, which is beyond ridiculous, because there are a lot of kids capable of excelling in a lot of these programs. SP, the college readiness, which I'm a big proponent of, which I believe we've done some work already around in the Springfield Gardens campus as well, at formerly known as Springfield Gardens High School, where they are doing a lot more college readiness there. I was proud to be there about 2 years ago and got to see young people, putting their, not only getting the preparedness and getting the resources to excel in this, but also seeing them drop their college applications in that box in a school that historically was disinvested in at one point, where a lot of kids were told they were not going to make it. A lot of our young people from the shelter systems, we had some gang activity there at one point. But I can tell you, these programs all make a huge difference. My job as borough president, let me just say this, will be to be the defender of this borough and the cheerleader. And the question is, how much am I going to fight for it? Because that's the big question. And I think the answer to that question is, we're going to go in, ready to fight for the expansions of these things. These are questions for the next for the chancellor and for the chancellor that will come after, therefore after, and then also for the mayor. And one of the things I don't want to see is this borough shortchange in these areas. There's a lot of talent here. And we need to make sure that these programs are getting expanded in every corner of the borough. And I will just remind, I'll keep talking about it, the state owes us money. We need that money as well. But this is also a question of will. And we need to make sure these programs exist in every corner of the borough. So you can count on me to be a big proponent of seeing these programs expanded.
Okay, I just want to remind you that when you're getting ready to go into that fight, you've got teammates right here on this call. These organizations that are co-sponsoring it, and just this borough. We want to see the same thing that you want to see. We're really in this together.
And I can't do it alone. And I'm not
Absolutely.
foolish enough to
We
think that
recognize
we're all
that.
stronger together. Even if there's a difference of opinion on in some areas, we can't do it alone.
We agree in so many more areas than we disagree.
Exactly.
So I think that's the approach that I want to make sure that we're cognizant of. So my next question, and I think this will give you an opportunity to address an issue that was brought up in the introductions. District 28 was awarded a diversity grant. Many families see this as controversial due to the lack of transparency in the process, and that it intends or appears to be an effort to dezone middle schools, which is highly unpopular in the district. What is your definition of equity and diversity?
Well, equity and diversity means everybody has the same opportunities. And we know, just based on what we've seen historically during COVID and prior to COVID, that's just not, it's not real. You know, if you live in certain parts of this borough, access looks different than what it looks like in other parts of the borough. So the central goal has to be to make sure that there's one Queens, and that this is a Queens that works for every single student the same way, where everybody gets a quality education, where everybody has the same resources, and that should not mean, you know, that shouldn't preclude, you know, some people will look at that as being the perfect world or imaginary. This shouldn't be imaginary in 2020. You know, every student should have access to the same things. And when we look at how COVID has impacted certain parts of the borough, and those parts of the borough all have a common denominator. What are they? You know, sorely under-resourced, no G&T programs, lack of access to healthcare, poor quality housing. And this is no fault of anybody on this line, or, you know, if you go back and look at how this city, as diverse as we are, how segregated we are. This is a housing issue as well, right? You know, housing patterns largely determine how segregated a community is. I've done a lot of work around fair housing in the city council, for instance. So there's no easy way to get to the question of integrating our school system because of our housing patterns, because of the affordability crisis, and because of redlining as well, right? We know banks have historically redlined and not given mortgages to people who had darker skin color, you know, around the country, but certainly it's not, you know, in this borough, it's no different as well. So the problem we have, and let me just start with this. First issue we have is that, you know, planning, true community planning has to be community planning. It can't feel top down. Otherwise, you're automatically going to have people resistant to a plan if it feels top down. I think there needs to be a lot more organic planning ground up, you know, when we have these conversations. And these are difficult, these are complicated conversations. You know, none of us started, you know, the things we're seeing, I would hope not, but a large part of us have not been a part of why New York City is segregated. These were the sins of our forefathers that really put us here. Reading Robert Moses' book again for the second time, you know, the way housing, the way public housing was put, you know, a lot of these things are all systemic. So how do we get at the root causes? Now, let me say this. We know that integrated schools work great for everyone, because guess what? In integrated schools, everybody gets access and opportunity to the same things. I actually do applaud my colleague, Helen Rosenthal in Manhattan, who got a lot of flack actually for the integration plan there. But last I checked, it largely has still been a successful school district. So I think there's a lot more work we need to do around this. I think we all have to get at the table. I think whether you're Black, white, Chinese, whatever, Asian, whatever you are, we all want the same thing at the end of the day. We want good schools, access for our children, and a pathway to a good career. So these are complicated conversations that I'm not going to resolve on this phone call, Zoom call tonight, but I think we all have to get at the table and make sure that DOE also understands that, you know, they have to respect the borough as well, and that they have to respect the parents through the process as well, and that it can't feel so top down. So I look forward to that continued conversation. I've been keeping up with it through the borough president's race, and I look forward to sitting at the table to work with everybody to make sure that even if a plan proceeds, that it's the strongest plan possible, and that it's a plan that's going to work for everyone.
Okay, outstanding. My next question is in the area of school safety. A total of 1,677 knives have been confiscated from New York City students in the 2018-2019 school year, which is 92% higher than 2015. Metal detectors are installed on certain campuses based on past incidents. Do you support metal detectors and NYPD presence in schools? If not, what do you do to ensure school safety?
So let me go through this. I told you I went to Jamaica High School, and there is no worse feeling. And I still remember this. I'm a 37-year-old Black man now. I remember going through that dark and gloomy auditorium every morning, which obviously caused me to be late some mornings too. But the feeling is I remember visiting Rikers Island 3 years ago. And when I went through the entrance of Rikers Island, it reminded me literally, and I said it triggered my experience at Jamaica High School. Because guess what? If you went red, you scan, if the scanner went off, the school safety agents would say, open your mouth. You want to check for a razor. They wanted to check for a weapon. And it criminalized you. So you got, I mean, listen, we all got used to it. But should children be criminalized, coming through a school system? The big question is, why are kids bringing these weapons into the school? A lot of them, feel unsafe when they leave their buildings. I have peers that I grew up with who probably was some of the people carrying the weapons, because when they left the school building, based on where they live, they could be assaulted. So it's a large question of safety. So we have to get at the root causes of why kids are carrying these weapons into the school. A lot of things are carried out from the neighborhood into the school building. And I didn't grow up a square. I grew up in Hollis. I grew up in a lot of different places. So I understand these things intricately because of the neighborhood I grew up in. So right now, in terms of scanning, obviously there's still a need, but I would hope that as we move forward, that the things we need for our children to prevent them from needing to bring weapons in. For instance, one of the hearings I held, and I chair the public safety committee, I do have oversight over school safety now. I remember holding a hearing with my colleague, Mark Traeger. And what we discovered in that hearing is that there were close to 5,000 school safety agents, and there were less than 3,000 social workers and guidance counselors in our schools. What is our priority? Is our priority over policing some of these kids, or should it be making sure that they're getting the social and emotional support, and that we have just as much guidance counselors, but certainly more guidance counselors than school safety agents in our schools? So we have a lot of work to do. And anybody who thinks that a scanner is going to resolve the issue, let me just remind you, kids leave the school building. When I went to Jamaica High School, some of the kids would just leave their weapons outside the school. You don't got to bring it in. They would stash it somewhere around the corner, or their friend would hold it, and then when they would get out the building, they would have access to it. So yes, we want our kids, and as the father of a 4-year-old, when I drop my son off, I want him to feel safe in that school, but I also want him to be safe on the outside. So we need to get at the issues, the core issues. So the question is, I think we were even playing with this, could you do roving scanning in a lot of these? And there are some districts that do that, but no student should feel criminalized or get used to going through Rikers Island, which it certainly felt like in Jamaica High School.
Okay, so in summary, should I assume you're saying it's a need right now?
I'm not for eliminating school safety agents. So I've never been. I think school safety agents could play. One of the things I'm supportive of is certainly taking them out of the NYPD. I'm not supportive of eliminating them. I am supportive of moving them over to DOE, because in a large amount of our school safety agents come from communities of color. So I know that there were calls to eliminate them totally, and I'm not supportive of that, and I'm not shy about saying that. because these are people who come from the communities, who understand the communities. Some of my school safety agents, when I came into school, I straightened up. I knew to take my hat off. There was a respect there. So we want to keep them employed. But there are different roles they can play. And they could also be helpful in some of the social and emotional stuff we're talking about as well. But a lot of times, especially for our kids in the shelters, the school safety agent is the first person who may say hello to them in the morning, right? So I think there's a role for them still to play. But what I want to caution people on is that the scanners are not the sole answer, because you get shot down the block when you leave the school. And I've seen that happen at Jamaica High School. Yeah.
I don't want to date myself, but my zone school was Erasmus, and I was quite pleased when I was not going there based on what was going on at the time in Brooklyn. So
it was rough.
I'll leave it there. It's not a matter of a lack of exposure and experience. I know when Jefferson was the first school to get that. So my last question before I turn it over is, the Borough President's office last year had a budget of approximately $80 to $90 million. What percentage of that budget do you see being allocated towards schools and education programs?
So I'm not going to put the cart before the horse, because we don't know what the financial situation is going to be next year. I will say to you,
percentage-wise is good.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, because who's to say I will have half of that next year, right? Like, we're in a $9 billion deficit. So I'm going to have to go in and fight to make sure we could even preserve that specific percentage. But I'll tell you this, each year in my own budget in the council, if you look at my record, I've probably put no less than $10 million a year just in my district into education. Over the course, and not only that, we've leveraged opportunities with the de Blasio administration to ensure that even when we're looking at housing and other things in our schools and our neighborhoods, that we can leverage money from the administration side for our schools as well. So if I gave you a percentage right now, I'd be lying to you, because we just don't know what for everybody on this line tonight, I'm a straight shooter. I don't dance around. I will give it to you straight up. We don't know what the budget will look like next year. But I will say this to you, that I am committed to making sure that we expand school seats, that our kids have the latest technology. I don't piecemeal projects. You can speak to principals in my district. They will tell you we build out STEM labs. I'm a big proponent of making sure that our institutions have the state-of-the-art stuff. And if you speak to any principal in my district, they will tell you the same, that we put our money where our mouth is. So I look forward to working with everybody. And, the most important thing is to make sure you don't assume that the borough president knows that you invite us into your buildings. There's not unlimited money to throw around. So we need to look at what are the things that are priority, and we want to try to make sure that we're doing that in a fair and equitable fashion. But let me also just lay this down on the line, that we're going to be looking at pockets of the borough that have historically been disinvested in, who have not seen the resources going in, and there's definitely going to be an equity formula as we look at the budget. So I will put that out there as well.
Outstanding. What I will say, and I'll turn it over to Phil Wong now, he'll ask some additional questions, but on a personal note, as a resident of your city council district, I do appreciate the work that you have done, and I thank you, and I look forward to your continued support, not only for the 31st, but for the entire borough of Queens. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll turn it over to Phil.
And thank you for the work you do. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Phil?
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes, you're on mute.
Yes, good. Yes. Okay, I would like to collect some questions from the audience who posted them in the WeChat window. Councilman Richards, do you support screening of schools? And if not, what would you want to look at as to determine admissions?
Oh, you said screening of
Screening of
admission
schools.
screenings, you mean?
Yes, yes.
I think we should look at a myriad of different things, and you know, I obviously want to work with many advocates on this as we move forward to make sure that we have a real flushed out proposal. But I mean, you could look at community service. I mean, there are a myriad of things you can look at students, right? You know, how are they excelling in their classes, for instance? Not everybody's good at test taking. You know, what are they doing outside? What does community service look like? You know, how engaged they are in their school building, right? You know, are they part of organizations? Are they trying to do the right thing? So I think there are a myriad of different things we can look at, you know, as you look at screening students for specialized high schools or programs.
But what about the other schools that's non-specialized high schools that's currently being screened? Do you support screening?
Once again, I go back to the same thing, you know, access, making sure that there's programming. You look at campuses like Springfield High School, for instance, where, and I go back to that because they have a veterinarian program there. They have, I mean, there are a lot of different things, but one of the things I also want to stress is that, you know, specialized high schools are not the total answer as well. You know, what programs, sure, what training programs, you know, are happening in some of these schools. And I know at the Springfield campus, for instance, they have a veterinarian program. The community was unaware that they actually had that. So we need to also look at, you know, what are some you know, what are some specialties that would get students into some of these schools, get them interested in, because a lot of parents, what they do, especially if you have a child that overexcels, they send their kids out of the neighborhood because they don't believe the local schools actually have programs that fit their children's needs, or they may not have a specific area of interest that their kids have. But what we found, and I remember doing this with Chancellor Farina, we went into the Springfield Gardens campus, and we got to see a lot of parents discovered these programs, and they were sending their kids back into the neighborhood to our local school. Far Rockaway High School, I talked about the Cisco program there. There's also an aviation program there. We need to see a lot more of these programs as well. But I think criteria have to be expanded. I don't believe in the test being the sole determinant.
Okay, thank you. There's a question from another parent posted at the chat window. Councilman Richards, you talked about the next mayor and the next chancellor, but the fight for the G&T programs and screen middle schools is right now. We may lose the latter as soon as next month. How quickly are you prepared to enter the fight? We just cannot wait until the next mayor or the next chancellor.
Well, let me say this. I'm not the borough president yet. I believe I'm not sworn into January. But that has been a fight that we've taken up our entire career. I'm also a member of the Black and Latino Asian Caucus, led by my colleagues, Danique Miller, and also Adrian Adams. And this is not a new issue. I mean, this is something I remember my colleague, even in Brooklyn, Robert Cornegie, pushing on this. We've been big proponents of expanding these programs across Queens, period, across the city, but specifically across the district that I represent now. I am happy to say that we did get a commitment from the de Blasio administration to actually enact a gifted and talented program in the Rockaways, which would have been the first. And then Alicia Heineman actually, and you know, had done a lot of work around this issue as well, our assembly member, and she was actually able to get forget which school got it, but we did get an additional G&T put into District 29 as well. So that work is ongoing, and as we talk about equity right now and what does that look like, these are the conversations that are happening all around the city, the question of diversity and access and equity. And I'm already in that fight. We'll continue to use our bully pulpit, but come January, we'll have a bigger bully pulpit, which I think we can make a big difference in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
From another question from Irene Ravevsky of Queens Parents United. Councilman Richards, the area of Queens are seeing rapid development, with some neighborhoods being transformed seemingly overnight. In fact, there are more than 500 residential units under construction along Queens Boulevard, in Rico Park and Forest Hills alone. And they're ready for occupancy within the next few years without regard on impact to local middle schools. As Borough President, how would you reconcile the rapid development with the needs for more middle school seats?
So I think you tied development, and let me start with this actually. You know, one of the greatest bills I think we've done in the city council actually, which passed, I believe, last year. Many of you know the city does EISs and environmental impact statements, and sometimes those environmental impact statements don't actually project the right information when it comes to the need for school seats. So I was happy to sponsor that bill, which now ties, when we're looking at development around the city will now have to spend a lot more time on what impacts the housing will have on school seats, and what does the amount of school seats need to look like. There are two different ways you can do this. You can look at this. So areas like Long Island City, who do have a lot of schools coming in, but there's still an immense need. Queens Boulevard, as you mentioned, the Rockaways as well. I remember even rezoning for Rockaway, where we're going to see a huge boom of new units over the course of the next decade in the city, not committing to a new school. So we have to use the leverage of land use as these negotiations happen to push the administration and developers, whether it's the developer paying for the school or whether it's the developer paying into additional seats, which is something we negotiated actually. We had a peninsula site rezoning in the Rockaways. The agreement we reached with that specific developer, which is going to bring 2,200 to almost 2,000 units online, is that as the units come online, they would have to pay in for additional seats to the district until they build a new school. So I think this is comprehensive land use planning. Actually, it's something that I want to really beef up in the borough president's office as well. Not to say that it's not happening, but really looking at these projects and not as of right, because as of right projects, which means a developer could just build at will, it's harder to negotiate with them. But as they come through what you would call the ULURP, the Uniform Land Use review process, we would work with the city and push developers to actually either pay in for additional school seats or to make sure that we're looking at land, which is really scarce in Queens. I mean, outside of the Rockaways and places like Long Island City, you would really push for expansions on current schools. But I will say that the chancellor and I have worked very closely. For instance, in the Rockaways, a large majority of new school seats coming online will go there, partly because of the projection of the units going up there. But that I would look to do no different as borough president. You know, my job would be to look at the whole borough and to make sure we're looking at it through that lens. So we'll look at that legislation closely, which mandates SCA and others to really report to us more frequently as development comes online. But we need to hold, like I said, developers accountable as these housing units come on and make sure that school seats are a large part of that conversation.
Okay, thank you. I'm reading.
Hey, Phil, one second. I'm checking on the time. We're at 7:17. I want to be respectful of so many families here and give them back a little bit of their evening. So I like to target 7:30 as the end of the program. As such, can you just ask 2 more questions?
Sure, absolutely.
And then we'll wrap up soon.
Okay,
Thank you.
Sure. Yes. One of them would be, let me just pick the. Okay, so right now, Councilman Richard, the parents-led governance bodies such as the CEC have no real authority over the DOE. Yet decisions about our children are made by the mayor, the chancellor, and the teacher unions. How would you empower parents to have more real oversight over DOE besides your PEP appointees?
Yeah, I mean, well, we have to leverage, and I'm glad you mentioned the PEP appointments, because I think there are ways to leverage those appointments as well. And this will come down to making sure that we are doing, and I believe Melinda was doing this, I want to make sure that I'm meeting with you all more frequently. And this comes down to how engaged am I with the administration, with you at the table. And, you know, I don't want to have conversation with the administration in a silo, you know, by myself. I think Horace alluded to us doing this together. I think if we can all collectively work together, we're stronger together, right? No one of us are strong without each other. You know, we need each other. So I think there are metrics and things we all need to sit down strategically and discuss. This is not just about, you know, if you think that the borough president just has this magic wand, a lot of people think elected officials just have this magic wand that could turn things on and off. It doesn't work that way. We're stronger together. So we need to actually, as we take this office, meet as soon as we can, and we need to come up with a real strategic vision of what we want to see, and then present that once again to DOE. But I'm a big proponent of parent participation of the CECs, and we need to make sure that they're strengthened, even in terms of programmatic support. You know, we talk about the budget. You know, are there things that we can do? And it's not, like I said, unlimited money, but are there ways that we can be supportive in strengthening our CECs as well? This is a challenging time, so I don't even want to lie to you. You know, parents are trying to pay their rent. You know, people are losing their jobs during this moment. So we have a large challenge ahead of us to stopping the bleeding that's happening across the borough now. And if we can improve the whole person, the whole community, that enables our parents to participate more and to have a stronger voice through these processes, and to make sure that we're holding the DOE more accountable. So a lot more work to be done there. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a cakewalk. I'm not going to give you rhetoric, but I think we all have to work collectively through these challenging times.
Okay, thank you. The last question, I'm trying to come through this. The last question I have here is, please comment on your position on closing of Rikers Island and building community jail in the Kew Gardens.
So I talked about this on the campaign. I have no problem in repeating it. For those of us who've seen and toured Rikers Island or know people who've been there, you know, jail is supposed to be about rehabilitating the whole person. Rikers Island is broken. It is a broken place. They have gladiator school there. It does nothing to ensure that our communities are safer, because you're actually being hardened in there at this point. Also, being that the island is so isolated, there's very little oversight on it. So it's a big problem, because once you cross that bridge there, you're in your own world. There's no oversight. I know the feds moved in. I think the DA's office moved in. They can't even get a handle on what's going on there, because it's so out of sight, out of mind. So one of the things that was important to me, even as we had this conversation around the closure, and it's something I said to the mayor, is what are the services that are being provided to people who end up, and remember, when you go to Rikers Island, you have not been found, you know, you're really being detained. You haven't been found guilty of anything. In this country, last I checked, is innocent till proven guilty, right? You know, I think there's this notion that once you go there, you're just guilty. But you have your right to court, and that's part of the Constitution. Your day in court is your day in court, whether you're guilty or not. So some of those young men there and women, you know, when I toured, some of them were in there doing geometry. You know, these young people were young people who lost their way, but who are giving the opportunity. These could be people who are your shop stewards, who are your union workers. And right now, it's very difficult to achieve that. One of the things I remember, I was speaking to a young man in there too when I toured, you know, just the facility, you know, a lot of them want training. That's something that I heard over and over there. The facility does not allow for state-of-the-art facility to really train people. They have programs there. So they had, I remember one young lady, for instance, was doing culinary arts in there. She was the first young lady, you know, we visited when we got in there to tour the facility, because I wanted to see it before I casted my vote. I know the horrors of it. I've heard the horror stories. But the answer is yes. I don't think there's any way to fix that place. It has, Khalid Browder, a 17-year-old young man who was accused of stealing a book bag, killed himself because of the horrors of that place. He never found himself again. I don't think we want any of that. I think we want people who go in who might have made a mistake to really have an opportunity to rehabilitate themselves. And if you're a hardened criminal, you know, you're going to be sent upstate, right? You're going to be sent to a different facility. But, you know, I think it's a horrible place. I don't see how you fix it. And I'm supportive of the closure.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Street. Okay, I'm done with all my questions. Yatin, please proceed with the next phase of the
Thank
meeting.
you, Phil.
Okay, thank you.
You guys can hear me okay? I transferred into my headphones. Thank you, Councilmember Richards, for spending this evening with us. I want to close out the evening by thanking all of my co-sponsors who worked with me on this event, for all the families that are here. We had, I think, over 110 families join us at one point. Of course, I want to thank Councilmember Richards. I know there are representatives from elected office throughout Queens. I saw Lisa from Senator Liu's office join us. A representative from Senator Sanders' office joined us, as well as Comrie. And there are probably others. And I saw Monica, I think, at one point as well from the Queens Borough President's office. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
For joining us tonight. We know as parents, it's been a chaotic summer and a lead into hopefully some in-person learning next week in school. I appreciate that you, Councilmember Richards, is a new public school parent. You know, you have a kindergartner, so you're going to be with us. You're going to be with us for the road, and you will see and feel and hopefully
I'm just as scared as you are, trust me.
And empathize with all of us in public schools, as public school parents. So I want to just thank everyone, and you know, we're here to lend a community voice to education, certainly of Queens, but Place represents all of New York City. So we want to continue to engage with our co-sponsors and with our elected officials. So good night, everyone, and we'll see you at the next Place event. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Stay safe. Stay
Thank
safe.
you so much.
Bye. Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Thanks, Yatin.
Take care.
Thanks,
Thank you.
bye.
Thank you, Yatin.